Black girl pays for old woman's groceries. 6 hours later, 5 SUVs arrive at her house. The fluorescent lights of Murphy's corner store buzzed overhead like angry wasps, casting harsh shadows across the cracked linoleum floor. Maya Williams stood in line, clutching a crumpled $5 bill and mentally calculating whether she had enough for the pack of ramen noodles and the small carton of milk her mother had asked her to pick up. At 17, she had become an expert at stretching every dollar until it screamed. The store sat on the edge of Riverside, a working-class neighborhood where dreams came in small packages and hope was measured in daily survival. Maya knew every crack in the sidewalk leading here, every pothole that could swallow a bicycle tire, and every face behind every counter. This was her world, predictable, humble, and honest. She shifted her weight from one worn sneaker to the other, watching the line crawl forward. Mr. Murphy, the store owner, moved with the enthusiasm of molasses in winter, his thick glasses sliding down his nose as he squinted at price tags. The other customers shuffled impatiently, a construction worker still dusty from his shift, a young mother bouncing a fussy baby, and 2 teenagers whispering about weekend plans. That's when Maya noticed her. The old woman stood directly in front of Maya, her fragile frame hunched over a small wire basket. Her clothes hung loose and threadbare, a faded floral dress that had seen better decades, a thin cardigan with more holes than fabric, and shoes that had been resoled so many times they looked like patchwork quilts. Her gray hair escaped from a loose bun in wispy strands, and her hands shook slightly as she rummaged through a tiny, worn purse. The basket contained the bare essentials: a loaf of day-old bread marked down to 99 cents, a small jar of peanut butter, a carton of eggs with a dented corner, and a single banana that had seen better days. Maya's heart tugged at the sight. She recognized the careful selection of someone choosing between eating and other necessities. "Next," Mr. Murphy called out, his voice carrying the weight of a long day. The old woman shuffled forward, placing her items on the counter with deliberate care. Maya watched as Mr. Murphy began scanning each item, the beeps echoing through the store like a countdown. "That'll be $12.67, Mr. Murphy announced, his tone neither kind nor unkind, just matter-of-fact. The old woman's hands trembled as she opened her purse wider, peering inside with desperate concentration. Maya could see the contents from where she stood: a few crumpled bills, some loose change, and what looked like a faded photograph tucked into a side pocket. "Let me see," the woman whispered, her voice barely audible. She began counting slowly, laying out crumpled dollar bills on the counter. 1, 2, 3. The line behind Maya began to grow restless. Someone coughed impatiently. The construction worker checked his watch and muttered something under his breath. The young mother's baby grew fussier, adding to the tension. Maya watched the old woman's face crumple slightly as she recounted her money. The woman looked up at Mr. Murphy with eyes that held a lifetime of dignity despite her current circumstances. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I seem to be a bit short. Could I put back the eggs?" Mr. Murphy's expression softened slightly, but before he could respond, Maya stepped forward. "I've got it," she said simply, pulling out her $5 bill and reaching into her pocket for the handful of quarters and dimes she'd been saving for the bus. The old woman turned to look at Maya, her eyes widening in surprise. "Oh dear, you don't need to." "It's okay," Maya interrupted gently, handing her money to Mr. Murphy. "Really?" Maya quickly did the math in her head. She'd have to walk home instead of taking the bus, and she'd need to tell her mother they were out of ramen for tonight. But looking at the old woman's grateful eyes, she knew she'd made the right choice. "That's very kind of you, sweetheart," the old woman said, her voice carrying an odd mixture of surprise and something else Maya couldn't quite identify. The woman's eyes seemed to study Maya's face intently, as if memorizing every detail. Mr. Murphy processed the transaction, bagging the woman's groceries with unusual care. As he handed over the bag, Maya noticed him give the old woman a strange, searching look, the kind of look you give someone when you're trying to place where you've seen them before. "Thank you," the old woman whispered to Maya, pressing a frail hand briefly against Maya's arm. Her touch was surprisingly warm, and Maya noticed the woman wore a simple ring on her finger. Nothing fancy, just a thin band that caught the harsh store lighting. "You have a beautiful heart, child," the woman continued, her voice gaining strength. "Remember that kindness always finds its way back." Before Maya could respond, the old woman shuffled toward the exit, her plastic bag rustling softly. Maya watched her disappear into the evening shadows beyond the store's glass doors, wondering if the woman would make it home safely. "That was real nice of you," Mr. Murphy said, breaking Maya's thoughts. But his tone carried an odd note, and when Maya looked at him, she saw confusion written across his weathered face. "Do you know her?" Maya asked. Mr. Murphy shook his head slowly, still staring at the door where the woman had exited. "Thought I did for a second there. Something familiar about her, but—" He trailed off, then shrugged. "Probably just my old eyes playing tricks on me." Maya gathered her remaining groceries, just the milk now, since she'd spent her ramen money on the stranger's food. As she walked toward the door, she couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had just happened, though she couldn't put her finger on what. The evening air carried the scent of approaching rain as Maya stepped onto the sidewalk. She looked both ways, hoping to catch a glimpse of the old woman to make sure she was safe, but the street was empty except for the usual evening traffic. As Maya began her walk home, she replayed the encounter in her mind. There had been something almost regal about the way the woman carried herself, despite her obvious poverty. And those eyes, sharp and intelligent, holding secrets that seemed too big for such a frail frame. Maya shrugged off the feeling and quickened her pace. Her mother would be wondering where she was, and her little brother Marcus would be getting hungry. She had homework to finish and a math test to study for. Life in Riverside didn't pause for mysterious encounters or strange feelings. But as she walked through the familiar streets of her neighborhood, past the corner barbershop with its flickering neon sign and the small church where her family attended Sunday services, Maya couldn't shake the old woman's words. Kindness always finds its way back. She had no idea how prophetic those words would prove to be, or how dramatically her life was about to change. In just a few hours, 5 black SUVs would pull up outside her modest home, and Maya Williams would discover that sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness can unlock the biggest mysteries of all. The ordinary Tuesday evening was about to become anything but ordinary. Maya pushed open the front door of their small 2-bedroom house just as the sun began to dip behind the row of similar homes lining Oakwood Street. The familiar scent of her mother's cooking greeted her, something involving onions and the last of their ground beef, stretched to feed 3 people for 2 meals. "Maya, that you?" her mother called from the kitchen. "Yes, Mom." Maya kicked off her sneakers and hung her jacket on the hook by the door. The house felt warm and lived in, with mismatched furniture that told stories of yard sales and hand-me-downs. Family photos covered the mantel above their small fireplace, chronicling birthdays, school events, and holidays celebrated on tight budgets, but rich with love. Her 10-year-old brother Marcus sat cross-legged on the living room carpet, homework spread around him like puzzle pieces. His tongue stuck out slightly in concentration as he worked through math problems that looked suspiciously like the ones Maya had struggled with at his age. "Where's the ramen?" her mother, Janet, asked as Maya entered the kitchen. Janet Williams worked double shifts at the local diner, and exhaustion showed in the lines around her eyes, though she never complained. At 34, she carried herself with the dignity of someone who had raised 2 children mostly on her own and took pride in keeping them fed, clothed, and loved. Maya held up the milk carton. "They were out of ramen," she lied smoothly, not wanting to explain how she'd spent their dinner money on a stranger. "But Mrs. Chen said she might have some at the corner market tomorrow." Janet frowned slightly but nodded. "We'll make do. We always do." Maya helped set the small kitchen table, listening to Marcus chatter about his day at school. He'd scored a goal during recess soccer and gotten a gold star on his spelling test. Simple victories that felt enormous in their small world. They were halfway through dinner when Marcus suddenly perked up, his fork suspended midway to his mouth. "Mom, there's a lot of cars outside," he said, peering through the kitchen window that faced the street. "Probably the Johnsons having another family gathering," Janet replied without looking up from her plate. but Maya felt a strange flutter in her stomach. She stood and walked to the front window, pushing aside the curtain her mother had sewn from clearance fabric 3 years ago. Her blood ran cold. 5 identical black SUVs sat parked along their quiet street like sleeping giants. They were the kind of vehicles Maya had only seen in movies, sleek, expensive, with tinted windows that reflected the streetlights like black mirrors. Each one was spotless, as if they just rolled off a showroom floor. "Mom!" Maya called, her voice tight with concern. "You need to see this." Janet joined her at the window, Marcus scrambling up behind them. All 3 Williams family members stared in stunned silence as doors began opening simultaneously from each vehicle. Men and women emerged dressed in crisp business suits despite the evening hour. They moved with the coordinated precision of a well-rehearsed team, their faces serious and professional. Maya counted at least 12 people, all looking like they'd stepped out of a corporate boardroom. "What did you do?" Marcus whispered, his eyes wide with the kind of fear children feel when they sense their safe world tilting off its axis. "Nothing," Maya breathed, but her mind raced. Had she accidentally shoplifted something? Had someone seen her take extra ketchup packets from the school cafeteria? The group approached their front door with purpose. Maya noticed that despite their formal appearance, they didn't move like law enforcement. There was something almost respectful about their approach. A sharp knock echoed through their small home. Janet straightened her shoulders, smoothing down her work uniform. "Stay behind me," she instructed her children, moving toward the door with the protective instincts of a mother bear. She opened the door just a crack, keeping the security chain latched. "Can I help you?" A woman stepped forward from the group, tall, elegant, with silver hair pulled back in a perfect bun and eyes that missed nothing. She wore an expensive-looking coat and carried herself with an authority that made their small porch seem suddenly cramped. "Good evening, Mrs. Williams. My name is Victoria Sterling. I'm the head of estate affairs for Veridine Holdings." Her voice was cultured, with the kind of accent Maya associated with old movies and private schools. "I'm looking for Maya Williams. Is she available?" Janet's grip tightened on the doorframe. "What's this about? Is my daughter in some kind of trouble?" "Quite the opposite, actually," Victoria said with a slight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Maya performed an act of kindness today that has significant implications. We need to speak with her about a matter of great importance." Maya stepped forward, her legs feeling unsteady. "I'm Maya." Victoria's eyes studied Maya's face with the same intense scrutiny the old woman had shown at the grocery store. Something flickered in her expression, recognition, perhaps, or confirmation of something expected. "Miss Williams, I represent the estate of Eleanor Veridine. You may not recognize the name, but you met Mrs. Veridine approximately 6 hours ago at Murphy's corner store." Maya's mouth fell open. The old woman in the threadbare clothes had a last name that required an estate representative? "The elderly woman you helped today," Victoria continued, "was Eleanor Veridine, the founder and matriarch of one of the world's largest luxury conglomerates. She passed away peacefully 2 hours ago." The words hit Maya like a physical blow. The frail woman who had struggled to pay for groceries was finished? "I don't understand," Janet said, pulling Maya protectively closer. Victoria's professional mask softened slightly. "Mrs. Veridine left specific instructions about Maya in her will. We need her to accompany us to the Veridine estate tonight for the reading of some unusual provisions." "Absolutely not," Janet said firmly. "My daughter isn't going anywhere with strangers, no matter who you claim to represent." Victoria reached into her briefcase and produced an official-looking document along with what appeared to be a photograph. "This is a copy of the relevant section of Mrs. Veridine's will, notarized this afternoon. And this," she held up the photograph, "is a security image from the grocery store today, showing your daughter's act of kindness." Maya stared at the photo, seeing herself handing money to Mr. Murphy while the old woman, Eleanor Veridine, watched with that strange, intense expression. "Mrs. Williams," Victoria said gently, "I understand your concern. But I assure you, Maya is not in any trouble. In fact, she may be the most fortunate young woman in the country right now. Marcus tugged on Maya's sleeve. Maya, what's happening? Maya looked at her little brother's confused face, then at her mother's protective stance, then at the sea of black SUVs that had invaded their quiet street. Neighbors were beginning to peek through curtains and step onto porches, drawn by the unusual spectacle. What did she leave me? Maya asked, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. Victoria's smile became genuine for the first time. Miss Williams, that's exactly what we need to discuss. But not here, and not in front of. She gestured tactfully at the growing crowd of curious neighbors. Maya felt as though she were standing at the edge of a cliff, about to jump into something that would change everything forever. The old woman's words echoed in her mind. Kindness always finds its way back. She had no idea that her small act of generosity had just made her one of the wealthiest teenagers in America. The ride to the Veradine estate took 45 minutes through increasingly unfamiliar territory. Maya sat in the back of the lead SUV between her mother and Victoria Sterling, watching the landscape transform from their working-class neighborhood to manicured suburbs, then to something that looked like it belonged in a fairy tale. Wrought iron gates, easily 12 feet tall, swung open silently as their convoy approached. Maya pressed her face to the window, staring at the sprawling mansion that emerged from behind ancient oak trees. The house looked like something from a Gothic novel, all stone towers, arched windows, and dramatic shadows cast by strategically placed lights. How big is this place? Marcus whispered from the front seat, his earlier fear replaced by wide-eyed wonder. The main house has 43 rooms, Victoria replied matter-of-factly. The estate covers 200 acres. Maya's family exchanged glances. Their entire house could probably fit in the mansion's foyer. The SUVs pulled up to a circular driveway dominated by an elaborate fountain. As they stepped out, Maya felt dwarfed by the sheer scale of everything. The front doors alone were twice her height, carved with intricate designs that probably cost more than her family's annual income. A butler, an actual butler, opened the doors before they could knock. He was a thin man with silver hair and the kind of posture that suggested decades of proper service. Good evening, Miss Sterling, he said with a slight British accent. The family is assembled in the library as requested. Thank you, Henderson, Victoria replied. She turned to Maya's family. Before we proceed, I should warn you, the Veradine family was not expecting this development. They may seem unwelcoming. Maya's mother squeezed her hand. We stick together, no matter what. The library was a cathedral of books, with shelves stretching 2 stories high and a massive fireplace crackling with warmth. Persian rugs covered polished marble floors, and oil paintings of stern-faced ancestors watched from gilded frames. But Maya barely noticed the grandeur. Her attention was immediately captured by the 3 people seated around a massive mahogany table, their faces ranging from annoyed to openly hostile. A man in his 50s sat at the head of the table, his expensive suit unable to hide a soft middle and the kind of complexion that came from too much rich food and fine wine. His eyes were small and calculating, and he looked at Maya as if she were something unpleasant he'd found on his shoe. Victor Veradine, Victoria murmured to Maya. Eleanor's eldest son. Across from Victor sat a woman who couldn't have been much older than Maya's mother, but everything about her screamed money, from her perfectly styled blonde hair to her diamond earrings that caught the library's warm light. She stared at Maya with barely concealed disgust. Celeste Veradine Morrison, Victoria continued. Eleanor's granddaughter. The third person was an elderly man with kind eyes and a worn leather briefcase. He stood as they entered, extending his hand to Maya's mother. Malcolm Ashworth. He introduced himself. I was Mrs. Veradine's attorney for 37 years. Please sit down. Maya found herself in a chair that probably cost more than her family's car, trying not to fidget under the hostile stares of Victor and Celeste. Can we please get on with this farce? Victor snapped, his voice carrying the entitled tone of someone who had never been told no. I have a board meeting in the morning. Malcolm opened his briefcase and withdrew a thick document. The last will and testament of Eleanor Catherine Veradine, he announced formally. Prepared and signed yesterday afternoon. Yesterday? Maya's mind reeled. The old woman had prepared her will just one day before their encounter? The standard provisions first. Malcolm continued, adjusting his reading glasses. To my son Victor, I leave the family's art collection and the property in the Hamptons. To my granddaughter Celeste, I leave my jewelry collection and the penthouse in Manhattan. Victor and Celeste relaxed slightly, satisfied smiles appearing on their faces. However, Malcolm's voice grew stronger. The bulk of my estate, including 40% of Veridine Holdings stock, the main estate, and liquid assets totaling approximately $2.3 billion, I leave to Maya Elizabeth Williams. The silence that followed was deafening. Maya felt as though someone had punched all the air from her lungs. She heard her mother gasp, heard Marcus whisper, "Billion with a B?" But the words seemed to come from very far away. What? Victor exploded, jumping to his feet so violently his chair toppled backward. This is impossible. She's nobody. A street kid who probably conned my mother. This has to be a mistake, Celeste added, her composed mask slipping to reveal something ugly underneath. Grandmother was ill, confused. She couldn't have been thinking clearly. Malcolm remained calm. Mrs. Veridine was examined by 3 independent physicians yesterday morning. All confirmed her mental competency. She was very specific about her reasons. He looked directly at Maya. She wrote, and I quote, "In 17 years, my own family has never shown me the simple kindness this young woman displayed to a stranger. She paid for my groceries expecting nothing in return, treating me with dignity when I appeared to have nothing to offer. This is the only true proof of heart I've seen in decades." Maya's hands trembled as the magnitude of what was happening began to sink in. "I don't understand," she whispered. "I just helped someone buy groceries." "Exactly," Malcolm said with a gentle smile. "You saw a human being in need and helped without hesitation, without recognition, without reward. Eleanor had been testing people for months, appearing as a homeless woman, a struggling elderly person, seeing how strangers would treat her when they thought she had nothing." Victor's face had turned an alarming shade of red. "She was my mother. I deserved—" "You deserved exactly what you got," Malcolm interrupted firmly. Mrs. Veridine was very clear about her disappointment in how her family had treated her, especially in her final years. Celeste leaned forward, her voice turning sickeningly sweet. "Maya, darling, you must realize this is all overwhelming. Perhaps we could help you understand the business, guide you through." "What Celeste means," Victor interrupted, his tone attempting diplomacy but failing to hide his rage, "is that running a global corporation requires experience, education, breeding. Perhaps we could arrange for you to sell your shares back to the family at a fair price." Maya looked at these people, these strangers who suddenly wanted to be her allies now that she had something they wanted. She thought about the old woman's kind eyes, about the dignity with which she'd carried herself despite her humble appearance. "I think," Maya said quietly, surprising herself with her own composure, "I'd like to learn more about what Eleanor wanted me to do with this responsibility." The word responsibility hung in the air like a challenge. Victor and Celeste exchanged a look that Maya didn't like at all, a look that promised this was far from over. 3 weeks later, Maya's life had become unrecognizable. The modest house on Oakwood Street was now surrounded by a security detail that Victoria had insisted upon. Reporters camped outside their front gate, shouting questions whenever anyone emerged. The headline, "Grocery Store Angel Inherits Billions," had dominated news cycles for days. Maya sat in her new bedroom at the Veridine estate. Eleanor had insisted in her will that Maya should live there during the transition, staring at her reflection in an antique mirror that probably cost more than her family's former annual rent. She barely recognized herself. Designer clothes hung in a walk-in closet larger than her old bedroom, but she still preferred her worn jeans and simple t-shirts. The knock on her door was gentle but persistent. "Come in," Maya called, expecting to see Ms. Greer, Eleanor's former nurse who had become Maya's unofficial guide through this bewildering new world. Instead, Celeste glided in, carrying a silver tray with tea and delicate pastries. Over the past 3 weeks, she had transformed from openly hostile to sickeningly sweet, playing the role of helpful cousin with Academy Award-worthy performance. "I thought you might like some refreshments before the board meeting," Celeste said, setting the tray on Maya's desk with practiced grace. "You must be nervous about your first official appearance." Maya wasn't fooled by the kindness. She had learned to read people differently now, to see the calculations behind their smiles. "Thank you, but I'm not hungry." Celeste perched on the edge of Maya's bed uninvited, her designer dress spreading around her like spilled champagne. "Maya, darling, I've been thinking. This whole situation must be so overwhelming for someone from your background. The media attention, the business complexities, all those stuffy board members questioning your every decision." Here it comes, Maya thought. The pitch. "What if I told you there was a way to keep some of the benefits without all the pressure?" Celeste continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I have connections at several excellent private schools in Switzerland. Very discreet, very exclusive. You could finish your education there, receive a generous monthly allowance, and we could handle all the messy business details here." Maya stood up, walking to the window that overlooked the estate's manicured gardens. "You mean you and Victor could handle the business?" "Well, yes." Celeste laughed, the sound like crystal breaking. "We do have the experience, after all. Grandmother may have had her reasons, but running a multi-billion-dollar corporation isn't exactly something you learn in public school." The condescension in her voice made Maya's jaw clench. "Is that what you really think? That I'm just some charity case who got lucky?" "Of course not," Celeste protested, but her eyes gave her away. "I just think you deserve to enjoy your youth instead of being burdened with all this responsibility." That word again. Responsibility. Maya was beginning to understand that it meant something different to her than it did to people like Celeste and Victor. A commotion outside caught Maya's attention. Through the window, she could see a news van pulling up to the estate's gates, followed by several cars filled with photographers. Her heart sank as she recognized the scene, another media ambush. "Oh dear," Celeste said, moving to join Maya at the window. But there was something in her tone that didn't sound surprised at all. "I wonder how they found out about today's board meeting." Maya turned to study Celeste's face more carefully. "You told them." "What?" "Maya, how could you possibly think? You've been feeding information to the press." Maya realized, the pieces clicking together. "The stories about my family's financial problems, the speculation about my grades, the photos of me looking confused and overwhelmed. That was all you." Celeste's mask finally slipped completely. "You have no idea what you've destroyed," she hissed. "This company was built by my family. My great-grandfather started it with nothing but ambition and brilliance. My grandmother may have lost her mind in her final years, but I won't let some teenage nobody destroy everything we've built." "I'm not trying to destroy anything," Maya said quietly. "I'm trying to understand what Eleanor wanted me to protect." "Protect?" Celeste laughed harshly. "You can't even protect yourself from a few reporters. How do you expect to handle corporate raiders, hostile takeovers, international markets? You're in over your head, and everyone knows it." Maya felt doubt creeping in, the familiar whisper that had haunted her since the will reading. Maybe they were right. Maybe she was just a kid from Riverside who had gotten impossibly lucky through a single kind gesture. What did she know about billion-dollar decisions and global markets? But then she remembered Eleanor's eyes in the grocery store, intelligent, assessing, hopeful. The old woman hadn't made this decision lightly. "You know what I think?" Maya said, surprising herself with the steadiness in her voice. "I think you're scared." "Scared?" Celeste scoffed. "Of what?" "Of the possibility that I might actually be good at this. That Eleanor saw something in me that she never saw in you." Celeste's face contorted with rage. "You little... Miss Celeste?" A new voice interrupted from the doorway. Ms. Greer stood there, her kind eyes taking in the tense scene. "I believe your father is looking for you in his study." Celeste smoothed her dress and rebuilt her composure with practiced ease. Of course. Maya, do think about what I said. The offer for Switzerland remains open. She paused at the door. Though I suspect after today's board meeting, you might be more receptive to alternative arrangements. After she left, Ms. Greer entered fully, closing the door behind her. She was a woman in her 60s with silver hair and gentle hands that had cared for Eleanor through her final months. Don't let her get to you, dear, Ms. Greer said softly. She's more desperate than dangerous. Am I making a mistake? Maya asked. Maybe I should just take the money and walk away. Let them have their company back. Ms. Greer sat down in the chair Celeste had vacated, her expression serious. Maya, there's something I need to show you. Something that might help you understand why Eleanor chose you. She reached into her cardigan pocket and pulled out a small digital tablet. Security footage and personal letters. Eleanor was planning this for months. Maya's eyes widened. What do you mean? She'd been watching you, dear. Not in a creepy way, Ms. Greer added quickly, seeing Maya's expression. But she had been testing people for nearly a year, looking for someone who embodied the values the Veridines had lost. You weren't her first encounter, you were just the first person to pass her test. As Ms. Greer activated the tablet, Maya realized her fight was just beginning. But for the first time since inheriting billions, she felt like she understood what she was fighting for. Ms. Greer's fingers moved across the tablet screen with surprising dexterity for someone her age. Eleanor started this project 11 months ago, she explained, pulling up a folder labeled Project Successor. She was disgusted by how Victor and Celeste treated her, especially after her first heart attack. They saw her as an obstacle to their inheritance, not as a person. The first video file opened, showing Eleanor in her bedroom, looking frail but determined. The timestamp read 8 months earlier. If anyone is watching this, Eleanor's recorded voice began. It means I've found someone worthy of carrying on my life's work, or I've died trying. Her eyes looked directly into the camera with the same intensity Maya remembered from the grocery store. My family has forgotten what built this company: integrity, compassion, and genuine care for people. They see only numbers and profit margins. Maya watched, transfixed, as Eleanor outlined her plan to find someone outside the family who embodied the values the Veridines had lost. She spent months creating different personas, Ms. Greer explained, switching to another file. Watch this. The screen showed security footage from various locations around the city. Maya saw Eleanor dressed as different characters, sometimes a homeless woman asking for help outside restaurants, other times a confused elderly person needing assistance with directions, once even pretending to be a customer service representative testing people's patience. She documented every interaction. Ms. Greer continued. Most people ignored her completely. Some were actively cruel. A few showed basic politeness, but only when they thought someone might be watching. Maya's heart ached watching the footage. In clip after clip, Eleanor was dismissed, avoided, or treated with barely concealed annoyance. One particularly painful scene showed her sitting on a park bench, pretending to be confused about where she was, while dozens of people walked past without offering help. Then she found you, Ms. Greer said, her voice growing warm. The grocery store footage appeared, but this version was much clearer than the grainy photo Victoria had shown. Maya watched herself notice Eleanor, saw the genuine concern in her own face as she observed the old woman's struggle. What struck her most was how natural her kindness looked. There was no hesitation, no calculation, just immediate human compassion. She came home that night more excited than I'd seen her in years, Ms. Greer said. She'd been watching you for weeks before the grocery store test. Watching me? Maya felt a chill. Not invasively, Ms. Greer assured her quickly. But she'd heard about you from Mrs. Patterson. You helped her with groceries several times when her arthritis was bad. And from Mr. Johnson, whose grandson you tutored for free. Eleanor made it her business to learn about people who showed consistent kindness without expecting anything in return. The tablet displayed a thick file labeled Maya Williams Character Assessment. Eleanor had documented dozens of small acts of kindness Maya had performed over the past year, things Maya herself had barely remembered. She updated her will the morning after your encounter, Ms. Greer continued. But she also knew Victor and Celeste wouldn't accept this easily. She prepared for their retaliation. A new folder opened, Family Contingencies. Maya's blood ran cold as she saw document after document detailing years of financial mismanagement, embezzlement, and abuse by Victor and Celeste. They'd been stealing from the company for years, Ms. Greer revealed. Eleanor had private investigators document everything. Victor's gambling debts, Celeste's fraudulent expense accounts, their attempts to sell company assets for personal gain. Eleanor kept all of this as insurance. Maya stared at bank records showing Victor had lost nearly $10 million in offshore casinos over the past 3 years. Celeste had charged personal vacations, jewelry, and even her wedding to company accounts, disguising them as business expenses. Why didn't she stop them earlier? She was gathering evidence, Ms. Greer explained. She knew that whoever inherited her position would need leverage against them. Eleanor was protecting you before she even knew who you were. Maya's phone buzzed with an urgent message from Victoria Sterling. Emergency board meeting called. Victor claims financial irregularities in your accounts. Press conference scheduled for tonight. They're making their move, Maya realized, showing Ms. Greer the message. Ms. Greer nodded grimly. Eleanor predicted this too. She said they would try to frame you for their own crimes once they realized they couldn't manipulate you. She pulled up another folder. But she also left you the tools to fight back. The screen filled with legal documents, all prepared and notarized months in advance. Lawsuits against Victor and Celeste for embezzlement, fraud, and breach of fiduciary duty. A complete audit of all their financial activities going back 5 years. Most importantly, a video statement from Eleanor herself, explaining everything and formally requesting their removal from any company positions. She also left you this, Ms. Greer said, handing Maya a sealed envelope with her name written in Eleanor's careful handwriting. Maya's hands shook as she opened it. Inside was a short letter. Dearest Maya, if you're reading this, it means they've tried to destroy you rather than accept you. Don't let them. You have something they never learned. The understanding that true power comes from lifting others up, not tearing them down. The evidence Ms. Greer has shown you is your shield. Use it not for revenge, but for justice. Clean house, but do it with the same grace you showed a confused old woman in a grocery store. I chose you not because you were perfect, but because you were real. Don't let them make you doubt that. With faith in your future, Eleanor. Maya looked up at Ms. Greer, feeling something shift inside her chest. The doubt and fear that had plagued her for weeks was transforming into something else, determination. They want to fight, Maya said quietly, folding Eleanor's letter carefully. Let's give them one. Ms. Greer smiled, and Maya glimpsed the steel that had made her Eleanor's trusted confidant for so many years. Eleanor would be proud. What's your first move? Maya stood up, straightening her shoulders with newfound resolve. I'm going to that board meeting. But first, I'm calling the authorities. It's time Victor and Celeste learned that some things are more important than money. The girl who had paid for a stranger's groceries was gone. In her place stood a young woman ready to honor the trust placed in her, no matter the cost. The Veridine Holdings boardroom was designed to intimidate. 30 feet of polished mahogany tables surrounded by leather chairs that had witnessed decades of corporate warfare. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a commanding view of the city skyline, while oil paintings of company founders watched from their gilded frames like silent judges. Maya entered to find the room already buzzing with tension. The 12 board members sat in their assigned seats, their faces reflecting everything from curiosity to barely concealed hostility. Victor stood at the head of the table, a stack of financial documents spread before him like weapons. Celeste sat nearby, her expression perfectly composed but her knuckles white as she gripped her briefcase. Ah, Maya, Victor said with false warmth that fooled no one. Thank you for joining us on such short notice. Maya took her seat at the opposite end of the table, Eleanor's chair, she realized with a pang of emotion. She placed Ms. Greer's tablet and Eleanor's evidence files on the table before her, drawing sharp looks from Victor and Celeste. "Let's get straight to the point," Victor announced to the room. "I've called this emergency meeting because disturbing financial irregularities have come to light in the estate accounts. It appears our young heiress has been using company funds for personal expenses." A murmur rippled through the boardroom. Maya felt 12 pairs of eyes studying her, measuring her reaction. She remained silent, letting Victor dig his own grave. Specifically, Victor continued producing documents with theatrical flair. Unauthorized transfers totaling $2.8 million to offshore accounts, luxury purchases charged to company credit cards, and inappropriate use of corporate jets for personal travel. Board member Harrison Webb, a man Maya had learned to respect during her orientation weeks, frowned at the papers. "These are serious allegations, Victor. Do you have proof?" "Right here," Victor said smugly, sliding copies across the table. Account statements, credit card records, flight logs, all bearing Maya's authorization signatures. Maya studied the documents as they reached her. The forgeries were good. Someone had spent considerable time and money creating them. But they had made one crucial mistake. "These are interesting," Maya said quietly, her voice carrying clearly through the silent room. "Especially considering I don't have signature authority on any of these accounts yet." Victor's confident expression flickered slightly. "What do you mean?" "The estate is still in probate," Maya continued, standing slowly. "According to the legal documents Malcolm filed, I won't have full signature authority until next month. So either these documents are fraudulent, or you're admitting that someone else has been using my name to steal from the company." The room erupted in whispers. Victor's face had gone an alarming shade of red. "Furthermore," Maya said, her voice gaining strength with each word, "I think it's time this board learned about the real financial irregularities plaguing this company." She activated Ms. Greer's tablet, connecting it to the room's presentation system. Eleanor's face appeared on the large screen, causing several board members to gasp. "If you're watching this," Eleanor's recorded voice filled the room, "it means my family has tried to frame my chosen successor rather than accept her leadership. What you're about to see is evidence of systematic theft and fraud that I documented over the past 3 years." Victor lunged toward the presentation controls, but Harrison Webb stood to block him. "Sit down, Victor. Let's hear what your mother had to say." The next 30 minutes were devastating. Eleanor's evidence unfolded like a prosecutorial masterpiece. Bank records showing Victor's gambling losses charged to company accounts, receipts for Celeste's personal purchases disguised as business expenses, documentation of inflated contracts awarded to their friends' companies in exchange for kickbacks. When Eleanor's video ended, the boardroom was silent. Celeste had gone pale, while Victor looked like a cornered animal. These could be fabricated," Victor stammered. "Digital manipulation, deep fakes. Are you suggesting your mother was a fraud?" Harrison asked coldly. "Because I've worked with Eleanor for 15 years, and I recognize her voice, her mannerisms, her intimate knowledge of company operations." Maya stood again, feeling the weight of everyone's attention. This was her moment, not just to defend herself, but to prove she deserved Eleanor's faith. "I didn't ask for this responsibility," she began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. 3 weeks ago, I was worried about having enough money for ramen noodles. But Eleanor saw something in me that I'm still learning to see in myself." She looked around the room, meeting each board member's eyes. "She didn't choose me because I was qualified by traditional standards. She chose me because I understood something that this family forgot, that true leadership means serving others, not serving yourself. A company this size touches millions of lives through its employees, its customers, its communities. That's not a privilege to exploit. It's a sacred trust." Maya turned to face Victor and Celeste directly. "I'm not here to destroy the Veridine legacy. I'm here to restore it to what Eleanor intended it to be. Which means there's no place in this company for people who steal from it." Harrison Webb spoke first. "I move for the immediate suspension of Victor and Celeste Veridine from all company positions pending a full investigation." "Seconded," came a voice from across the table. The vote was unanimous, 11-0, with Victor and Celeste abstaining. 2 hours later, Maya stood in Eleanor's private office, her office now, watching the sunset paint the city in shades of gold. The weight of what had happened was still settling in. Victor and Celeste had been escorted from the building by security, their company access revoked, their assets frozen pending investigation. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "Saw the news. So proud of you, baby. Dinner's at 6, your favorite." Maya smiled, remembering what truly mattered. She had billions of dollars now, more power than she had ever imagined possible. But she also had a plan. She opened her laptop and began typing. The Eleanor Veradine Foundation for Youth Opportunity Mission Statement, to provide educational scholarships, mentorship programs, and entrepreneurial support for underprivileged young people who demonstrate kindness, integrity, and leadership potential. Outside her window, the city lights began to twinkle like earthbound stars. Maya thought about a frail old woman in threadbare clothes, struggling to buy groceries but choosing to test the world one more time for proof that goodness still existed. Eleanor had found her proof. Now it was Maya's turn to prove that kindness, once planted, could grow into something magnificent. The foundation would be her first act as the new head of Veradine Holdings. Because Maya Williams understood something that Victor and Celeste never would, the greatest inheritance isn't money, it's the opportunity to make the world a little better than you found it. Kindness doesn't need a camera or a contract. It just needs a moment, and someone willing to take it.